Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Mr. Carr.
Shabbat Shalom.
All right, hallelujah. As always, it's a pleasure seeing everybody here this Shabbat evening, and we're going to have another dynamic lesson, prayerfully, as always. And the title of today's show is going to be called Another Look at Barashyth, or Genesis. We're going to be looking at verses 1 and 2 again. This is going to be part 3 of the series, and prayerfully we'll be able to get it done today, and we can move forward from this point forward. All right, anybody have any testimonies to share with us how the Father has been blessing them, baruching them, giving them esteem, His grace, His mercy, His love, His kindness? Anybody wants to share anything?
Well, I'm just happy to have somewhere to go on Shabbat and get deep, insightful, enriching word for me and my Yashra'al. So I'm thankful for that.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I thank the Father for waking me up this morning, giving me life, health, and strength, giving me the ability to get right everything that I got wrong yesterday. So I'm always thankful. I understand that I will forever be in the Father's debt. When I get the opportunity, which is every day, to pray and understanding what prayer actually means, when we're actually confessing our sins to the Father, looking at who we truly are, and just looking back and asking myself whether or not I truly deserve to be here based upon the covenant that we made with our ancient forefathers. And the question came up for me is absolutely not. So I'm forever in debt for everything that the Father's done for me, my family, and so through the trials and tribulations, I'm going to keep on moving, because I know that he that endureth unto the end shall be saved.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm always thankful for everything that the Father has done for me. Anybody else? Anybody else?
I would just say that I would definitely second everything you just said. I would also just like to say I've been excited just about some of the things we've been talking about as far as moving forward and building.
All right.
Not only just the congregation, but a community and the fellowship that's going to end up with all of us being pulled together as a mishpachah.
Right.
It's exciting. And
Yes.
all week I've just been going over things and thinking of ideas and just can't wait till we can sit down and share them and just move forward.
Absolutely.
I think it's great things to come. I see us growing. I see us reaching out and being. I think our main thing is we need to be about our Father's business. We got one thing to do on this earth once we realize who we are when we're awake, and that is to bring about the kingdom of Yashra'al. Okay? That is our only goal in life. And
Right.
if our goal is anything other than that, then it gets cluttered with everything but that, and we find all kind of reasons to do everything else, like go to parties or hang out or do whatever. But when we're about our Father's business, then we know where our quote unquote, as the military used to say, our place of business.
Okay.
Our place of business is in Shabbat.
Right.
On Shabbat.
Exactly.
So I thank you for that, and like I said, I am so excited about the things that we are going to do.
Hey, listen, I can feel the energy. Hallelujah.
Oh, yeah.
Hallelujah. And this is the whole thing is about. It's about a family, a mishpachah, building together, learning how to get along with one another, learning how to forgive one another, and just move forward from there. Because the time is definitely critical. We see what was going on in the news throughout the week. They made the report that we was like 10 minutes away from going to war with Iran.
Right.
And Iran said that they're ready. So but I still, even with things like that, I take with a grain of salt. But I do understand, okay, that we're living in some real serious times here. And there's certain things that's going on with Donald Trump, and he's trying to take that attention off of him because the elections are coming up. And so we know what the Republic is always about. I mean, they like war. Right. So if we can now get the people's mind off of the real issue, okay, and let's create chaos. And then out of the chaos, let's try to bring some type of sanity out of it. Then the person now, such as a Donald Trump, all right, might get the votes who they're looking for to become a second-term president again. So there's a lot going on with that. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get the class started today. I'm going to blow the shofar 7 times facing the east, and we'll have Zabu to bring us in with prayer.
Safely and to partake in what is about to be an awesome time. We thank you that we're able to have some music playing. We know that ushered into your spirit, Father, and we thank you that we're able to praise you, to open our mouths and praise you, Father, because many people did not do that this morning. And we look forward to it, Father. We humbly bow before your throne. Not because you said we should, but because we know you're worthy of it, Father. And so, Father, we bow before you, we thank you, and we praise you, we magnify you, and ask you to meet us here, to open up the understanding of our hearts and our minds, that we can receive what it is that you're going to say through 3Moreh, Father, Kasadahba, Father. We thank you and ask that you will be with 3Moreh Aliahu and the time of the needs that his mother has, Father, and pray that she would have a fuller recovery, Father, and she will look back on this thing and she will be able to know that it was you who did it, Father. We thank you for your awakening that is going forward throughout this earth, Father, and pray that you continue to awake us, Father. We don't like war. We don't like what happens in war, but we know that through war, you're going to deliver your people. And so even though we're afraid and even though we don't want it, we don't like it, we thank you, Father, that you might have to move through these people to be able to get us released, Father, from this slavery that we're in. It's time, Father. It's time. And until you decide to pull us out of this thing, until you decide to move us forward, we're just going to keep our heads down, keep our hands to the plow, and keep on moving on, trying to wake up your people and deliver them and bring them unto us as a mishpachah, Father. Okay? And as we bring them unto us, then 3Morehs will also help to bring them unto you by opening up their spirit and their minds, Father. We thank you and praise you and magnify you and lift you up. Those who are on their way, who we pray that you give them traveling graces. Those who could not make it, we ask that you will let them be here on Wednesday or either on next Shabbat, Father, that they may be able to partake in this goodness that you have going on here, Father, which is being able to share in your word. We praise you, we magnify you, we lift you up in your Son, Yashra'al HaMashiach's name, we pray. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Excellent. 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 Okay, Mr. Bakar, again, it's a pleasure seeing everybody here again this beautiful Shabbat day. And we're going to take another look at Barashyth, the first and second chapter, and this will be part 3. But before we get started, as always, we want to begin by giving all esteem to the Father, Ab Yahuwah, the creator of all things, everything. He created all things. And to his messenger. That word messenger is going to be extremely important. And to his messenger, Yashra'al HaMashiach, who is that atoning sacrifice for the nation of Yashra'al. Now, looking at the Father, which is extremely important, all esteem is to the Father. why do we believe we should give all esteem to the Father? All right, so what I'm trying to make sure that everybody develops out there in YouTube land, Facebook, and everybody here in the congregation, it is important that we all have a relationship with the Father. So in order to have a relationship with the Father, the question is that we all have to ask ourselves, why do we believe that we should esteem the Father? All right? Why should we esteem the Father? Any volunteers?
He created everything.
Exactly.
All right, there we go. Because he created everything.
Gave us life and put us in this beautiful world.
Absolutely. Hallelujah.
Because we made a covenant with him.
Say that again.
Because we made a covenant with him.
Yup, hallelujah. Because we made a covenant with him. So we should give all the esteem to the Father because of all the good things that everybody has shared with us here today. So everybody's answer was correct. We're going to go to the book of Matthew, or the book of Matthew. And the question is, why do we believe that we should give all esteem to the Father, Yahuwah? And we know that the book of Matthew, Matthew the 6th chapter, beginning with verse 9, is the Father's prayer. So as the Mashiach is talking to his Talmudim, his disciples, I find it very interesting, like I brought out so many times before. The Mashiach is not over the Father. The Father is the omnipresent. The Father is who we call in Hebrew the Ein Suf, spelled A-Y-N-S-U-F. A-Y-N-S-U-F. And we're going a little bit more into that definition a little bit later on. But the Mashiach tells the Talmudim, he says, in this manner, therefore pray you. Our Father, which art in Shamayim, or in heaven, and set apart is the Father's name. So just by the Mashiach explaining to us on how to pray and understanding, like we had brought out last week, what is prayer? The Hebrew word for prayer. Do anybody remember what the Hebrew word for prayer is?
Tehillim.
Right.
Tefillah.
Tefillah. There we go. There we go. Tefillah. All right. And so we went into the word tefillah is actually, there's some nice definitions with it. But what I wanted to stay focused on is with the word tefillah is that it means to judge. And so what we're actually doing now is that we're looking into ourselves and making sure that we are in proper alignment with the Father, and making sure that we understand that the Father's name is set apart. And if the Father's name is set apart, then we also too should be set apart. That's all we wanted to do was go to the book of Matthew, the 6th chapter, verse 9. And I wanted everybody to pay close attention to the heading where it said, Our Father, which art in heaven, set apart be thy name. We're going to go to the book of Hebrews. 11th chapter, Mishpachah, verse 3. Why should we give all esteem to the Father? It says, for by faith, and the Hebrew word for faith is emunah, for by faith we understand the worlds were framed, or the ages now were framed by the Word. That word is going to be extremely important. By the word of Elohim. And that things seen, all right, originated from those things that are not seen. So verse 3 speaks volumes, because what it's going to actually do now is give us a better understanding of, or overstanding of what's going on in the book of Genesis, the 1st chapter and 2nd chapter. So again, it says, for by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of Elohim. But we have the word God there. Do anybody know what the word, okay, of Elohim is? What is the word?
His commandments.
Okay, his word is the commandments, Torah. All right. But what I found interesting here now is that when we begin to look at context and the way that scriptures are written, that word, okay, is not the same word that we find in the book of John 1:1. Remember I said in the beginning was the Word? That word there is logos. All right? That word is logos there.
In John 1:1.
John 1:1. That word is logos. Now, that word in the book of Hebrews, the 3rd chapter, is Ramah. Here we go.
The word
Ramah. It's Strong's number 4487, and it's spelled R-H-E-M-A. Now, we're going to go to the Greek word study, transliteration, pronunciation, etymology, and grammar of the word. That word, Ramah, means that which is or has been uttered by the living voice, a thing spoken, and it also has a definition of word. Any sound produced by the voice and having definite meaning, speech, disclosure, what one has said, a series of words joined together into a sentence, a declaration of one's mind made in words or utterance, and then it just pretty much goes on. It gets kind of repetitive with the definition. And then we have the Thayer's New Testament Greek and English lexicon, where it means an utterance, by implication, a matter or a topic. So, at another time, we're going to look at now the Aramaic, okay, reading of the book of John 1:1, because it's a lot different from the way that we have it in the Masoretic text. And so my argument here, just to let you know, is that the King James Version, the Masoretic text versus the Aramaic, I'm going to lean more towards the Aramaic. And what also too now is that when we do our studies, it is very important that we do a comparison or comparative reading with different sources to try to make sure that we come up with the best source. So again, I just wanted everybody to understand that in giving esteem to the Father, it takes a responsibility that we must have. And so I went to the book of Matthew, the 6th chapter, verse 9, talked about that the Father name is set apart, and that we must be set apart. And that the Father now is responsible, and I read it just one more time. For by faith we perceive that the worlds were ordained by the word of Yahuwah. And just to let some of it out of the bag today, the word of Yahuwah, and we know that the word is the Hebrew word dabar. This is the dalet, the bet, and the resh. And this is dabar. And if the word, it means word, and if the word became flesh, and it came from the Father, and this word became flesh, that word would be who? Or what? Somebody said it. Mashiach. The word became flesh and it tabernacled amongst us. But we're going to go through something a little bit different in the book of John 1:1. Probably Tuesday. Probably Tuesday. Next, we're going to go to the book of Colossians. The book of Colossians, the 1st chapter. I'm going to read verses 12 and 9. Colossians, the 1st chapter, verses 12 to 19. And made with joy. That's going to be the key thing. Not with a bitter heart, not with envy, jealousy, or malice. And made with joy, give thanks to the Father or Elohim, who is the Father, who has fitted us for a portion of the inheritance of the saints in light. That word inheritance is going to be very important. In order for us now to receive this inheritance, there's a certain way that we must walk. Verse 13, and have rescued us or delivered us from the power of darkness. Anybody know what darkness is?
Sin.
Right, chaos and sin. Hallelujah. And he had delivered us from the power of darkness, which is sin, chaos, and had brought us into the kingdom of his beloved Son, which is Yashra'al HaMashiach, in whom we have redemption. We have redemption through the Mashiach and the forgiveness of sins. The Mashiach, who is the image of Yahuwah, the unseen. The Mashiach is the firstborn of all creatures. And by him, anybody know who that him is? Was everything created?
Mashiach.
Right. And the Mashiach is a messenger operating in or on behalf of the Father. The Father and the Mashiach are one. So we now have, and by him was everything created that is in heaven and in earth, all that is seen and all that is unseen. So the invisible to the visible, from the seen to now which at one point was unseen, is going to be important based upon today's class. Whether they be thrones or dominions, or princes or powers, all things by his hands and through him were created. And he is before all, and everything by him subsided. And he is the head of the body of the church. And who would that be?
Yashra'al.
Mashiach.
Right, who is the head of the body of the church?
Mashiach.
Right, because remember now, we have, the vineyard belongs to who?
Father.
Right, so we have the head, we have the Father, Yahuwah, all esteem goes to him. Then we have the Son, which is Yashra'al HaMashiach. The Father would be Yahuwah. After that, we would have what order inside of the house?
The Father.
Okay, we have the Father
The Son. You said in the house. In which house?
in the Father's house.
Oh.
Was that?
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right, so the chain of command in the Father's house would be the Father, the Son.
The Spirit. Set apart Spirit.
Right, yes, that too. It would be then the man, right? We're talking about inside of the Father's house, because we're talking about a chain of command, the way that things are ran. We know Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But what we try to do is get to the book of Corinthians. I think it's the 10th chapter. We have the Father, the Son, the man. Then we have the Yashra'al. Then we have the children, which consists of all the house of Israel. This is all Israel here. And if we were talking about temple services, then it would be the literal Gentiles. So this is the way that the structure is supposed to go. The Father, according to the scriptures that we're bringing out here, it would be the Father, the Son, the man, the Yashra'al, the children. And I don't really have to put this here, but I just put that there just to describe if we wanted to look at this now as a temple. So that order is going to be extremely, extremely important. So, he is the head of the body of the church, okay? He who is the chief and firstborn from among the dead, which is the Mashiach, that he should be preeminent in all. For in him the Father hath willed all fullness to dwell. So we know that now. I read it now in the regular standard King James Version. And it pleased the Father that in him all fullness should dwell. So we know that the Father rested his Ruach on the Mashiach as he did with other prophets. But the way that the Father rested upon the Mashiach is a little bit different versus the other prophets. or messengers. Now, we're going to get to the Genesis 1 and 2, but I want to just set the stage here because probably I should have done this first. If someone was to ask you, all right, because we're going to need some participation here. Don't get so caught up in the word that I'm going to be using because everybody knows what I'm referring to. If someone was to ask you, who created God, what would your answer be? Noah?
No one.
Oh, no one? Oh, okay. Okay, we know that this word here is created, and it means the Hebrew word bara. If someone was to ask me who created God, or the Father, I would have to say God. Because, a lot of people always say, what's greater than that thing and what's greater than that thing? So everything goes back to what we call the source, because everybody's trying to look at, for the most part, where does things originate? In order for the Father to dwell with us or to explain to us what's going on this terrain, he has to deal with us on a physical level. Because technically, whenever you give something a name, all right? Whenever you give something a name, that sets the stage that you're actually greater than the thing because you actually named it. All right? So what I'm trying to get at here is that a lot of times you might hear a lot of people like myself say sometimes, it all depends the audience. I might look at the Father or call him, I just say the creator of all things. The creator of all things. I have no problem with the Yod-Heh, Hu-Heh. No problem with that at all. He's the creator of all things. And the reason why I look at it from this perspective, and again, I have no problem with the name at all, is that when we look at the creation story, we see Adam naming his Isha. So we now have, or we see the stage being set where he has the dominance over the thing that came from him. Just like if you was to have children, your children that came from you would have to be now in submission to you. Anything that comes from you would have to be in submission to you. Like my mother used to always tell me, you know what, I brought you into this world, so I'll take you out of this world, all right? I have that authority. And all of the animals that was brought to Adam, he was able to name those things. And when the Father saw that he was able to name these things, the Father told him that he had the Hebrew word radah, and that word means dominion. Dominion, I think that's how you spell it. So anything that comes from you, anything that you name, okay, you have dominion over that thing. And so whenever we see now the Yod-Heh, Hu-Heh, this is something that we use on this physical terrain in order for us to explain who the Father is and who created all things. But everything goes back to the source. All right, everything is centered around the source. Now, can we physically see the Father?
No.
Okay. My answer is yes. We can see the Father in this physical terrain. The way that we can actually see the Father in this physical terrain is that he's given us examples of who he is through his creation. Now, in the spiritual realm, okay, then I would say no, but being that we're physical beings, if someone was to ask me now, I was explaining to a person, listen, you know what? I see how the planets are aligned, and we're going to talk about some other things here too. Maybe what I do is I'll go ahead and hand some of these things out. This is how we're able to now see the Father. If you just pass that out, because we can definitely see the Father. And once everybody gets it, we'll talk about it from here. Okay, Mr. Picard. We can see the Father through what we call now today is called a periodic table of elements. Everything is based upon atoms, cells, and all these things that's listed here on this chart. And I'll just show this chart here to the YouTube and Facebook fans out there. So I'm able to see the Father physically through his creation. I call this creation I call this creation in the picture, meaning that there was always existence. There was always existence. So this is my argument in order for us to properly understand what's going on in the book of Genesis. There was always existence. All right. So, if anybody have any questions, I'm ready. Before atoms, all right. Before energies, before gas, or what we know as subatomic energy is what we have here on this table of elements, all right? Before all those things, there was the source of all things, the Father of Yahuwah, the Ein Sof. The word Ein Sof just means without form or without definition. Before evolutionary creation, the evolving of existence from density to matter, to atoms, to cells, to organisms, to bodies, before all these things, there was existence. And all of this now is coming from a source, and that source now I'm calling the Father of Yahuwah, and everything is centered around him. Before there was light, before there was energy, before there was matter, before time, before space, before place, before the human body, before the soul, before the Ruach or the Spirit, there was the source of all things, again, the Father of Yahuwah. And the way that we're able to explain the Father's creation now, it is a scientific fact, all right? So if anybody was to tell you that history has no place in the scriptures, run from them. If anybody tells you that science, all right, chemistry, this periodic table of elements has nothing to do with the Father, run from them, all right? Because we're going to have to then get into the point now where we begin to look at the lightest atom, okay, which we know to be hydrogen. All right, so these things are going to be very important for us to be able to understand what it actually took in order for there to be a creation. Everything that we see on this periodic table of elements needed to be in its proper order in order for there to be creation. If anything is out of whack, anything that's out of place, none of us would be here. Everything that we see that's going on around us that we can see physically and that we can't see is all centered around the magnificent works of the Father. So this is the reason why we make sure that we always give esteem to the Father, because each and every one of us here in this room is made up of cells and atoms. Every last one of us here. And so when I began to read and understand that, it puts me now in a different mindset where now I must always make sure that I give all esteem to the Father, because nobody else can do this but the Father. This human body that we have is such a unique body of cells that can't be duplicated by anything else that the Father has made. He is so unique in everything that he has done. But when he made that, the mankind, oh boy, he broke the mold there. So based upon my limited understanding of the Father, I can see him through his creation and by his periodic table of elements. Now what I wanted to do was to take a quick look at the periodic table of elements for just a few minutes. These are facts, okay? Facts, and these facts can also be found in the book of Genesis, the first chapter. Everything, when I say everything is made up of atoms, even the human body. And possibly one of the most admired elements or matter or atoms that people go as far as they kill for is gold. And there's a reason why I'm saying gold. Because I notice now, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is that in the whole creation story, the Father made mention of 3 important minerals. All right? 3 important minerals in the book of Genesis, the 2nd chapter. Do anybody know what those minerals were? Gold, bdellium,
What did you say?
bdellium,
Onyx.
and onyx, right?
Yeah.
And so, when you look at your periodic table of elements, all right, I don't have it outlined here properly.
So I'm about to go deep.
Yeah, and so what's happening now is that when you look at energy and electricity, all right, gold is the best conductor of electricity. I wasn't able to find bdellium, but we know that also onyx. O-N-Y? Onyx. On our chart here, when you look at, for example, going from A1, which is number, what is that, 13? I don't have my glasses with me. Is that 13 that you have? Or is that 19? 13, isn't it?
Aluminum?
Right, that's an aluminum.
That's 13.
And then you have 32 GE.
31 GA.
Right, 30, right, 32. Excuse me, this A1, GA, SN, and B1,
10.
and B1 you have, that's 10? That's 83, isn't it?
83.
Okay, 83, right? I don't have my glasses.
This one.
So anything from the left there, those are all metals. And anything from the right of there, they're non-metal objects. And the reason why I'm bringing this out is because electricity is very important, meaning now that even our body produces electricity. All right, so the creative design of the body is very, very important. Again, everyone in this congregation has gold on them, everybody. Meaning that even through your cell phones, and gold is the best conductor of electricity. Again, gold is very important. Another thing too now is that everyone here is breathing mercury, all right, which comes from our fossil fuels, namely one in particular is coal. Another one is gasoline. The origin of gold can be found, or the components of gold can be found in the periodic tables. I just talked about that, and we talked about the number, that's the number 79. That's AU 79. And mercury is the number 80 on the periodic chart. These are all climatic conditions, all right, in order for life to exist here on the planet Earth. Like we had talked about so many times before, again, the human body is made up of mostly water, and water is hydrogen. And the chemical makeup of water is, anybody know?
H2O.
H2O. So we have what? 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. Now, looking at this periodic table of elements and looking at how the human body, the makeup of the human body, I have here, we are composed of 65% oxygen, 18.5% carbon, 9.5% hydrogen, 3.3% nitrogen, 1.5% calcium, phosphorus, 1% phosphorus, 0.4% potassium, sulfur, 0.3%, sodium, 0.2%, chlorine, 0.2%, magnesium, 0.1%, and other traces of elements, they have 0.01%. and you can find, when we talk about traces of elements, when you look at the last 2 lines on the periodic table of elements, these are some of the traces of other elements that we find within ourselves. So only thing that I'm just sharing here now is that if anybody again was to ask me, can I draw oxygen? Yes, I can. Can I draw electricity? Yes, I can. But the way that we're drawing these things now is through a mathematical formula. I've shared with classes before where the Father is the creator of all things, and he's like the master geneticist. And one of the first languages and the best language out there is mathematics. I mean, to understand mathematics, which is a language, which is the language within itself, it will really bring a whole lot to clarity if we properly understood it. And this is the reason why I pay so much attention to this periodic table of elements, which is now going to bring me to the second stage of everything, is back to Genesis, and why I brought out that chart there. Now we're just going to read on down, and we're going to get to the point, so we can go into Genesis, the 2nd chapter, and we can say, all right, this is the reason why I went through all of that. Because climatic conditions are very important. We go to the book of Genesis, the 1st chapter again, but we pretty much is just going to read straight down. Another thing, I would suggest that we get a little bit more familiar with the Hebrew language, because, for example, when I say in the beginning Elohim created the heavens and the earth, that's the English version of it, but when you look at it in Hebrew, it's not worded that way. Because in Hebrew, we have to understand now is that there's limited prepositional phrases. There is no such word as of in Hebrew. There is no such word as a in Hebrew. So what they're doing now is that they're trying to make the sentence with English grammar rules sound correct. But this is going to be the thing. When you do that, you're taking away from the actual verse. Meaning now is that if I did this in Hebrew, now it would be Barashyth, Bara, Elohim, X, Hashemayim. Then it has the woo sound or the oo sound, and that makes, so there are conjunctions like an and, a oo or vav will be an and then it has the aleph ta symbol again, and then we have ha eretz. So the way that this is looked at on the surface level, that this is the beginning, but this is not the beginning. This is a beginning, because this is not the beginning, but it's just letting us know here now is that in the creation of all things now, there was the source, and everything now goes back to the source, which is the Father. And it talked about in verse 2 now, and the earth was without form, so I'll just read it on down. And the earth was without form, and void and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters, right? So that's what everybody has in verse 2. Watch how Hebrew is. When you read this in Hebrew now, it does not say that the Spirit of Elohim moved upon the face of the waters. It does not say that. Which is, see, this is the reason why text, T-E-X-T, is going to be very important. Where we have the word moved upon the face of the waters, the word moved is a verb. But, and I'll go to the word, I'll show you the word in Hebrew. But it says now that the Ruach of Elohim hovered upon the face of the water. Which for me changes things, all right? And we're not going to go there today, but there are other writings, all right, that shares a little bit more in detail what's going on in verse 2. But if you was to look at, for example, the word Rakaf, which is the Strong's number 7363. It means to, in the Paul stem system, it means to grow soft, to relax. In the Pale system, it means to hover. Okay, so we have a hovering that's going on over the earth with this rest period. Now, the Ruach of Elohim is hovering upon the face of the waters. Anybody know what's going on here in verse 2? If the Ruach of Elohim is actually hovering over the waters?
That means he's sitting in one spot.
Yeah, it's sitting on one spot, but we have the Father here now observing this situation. Because we have talked about here now in this periodic table of elements now, is that something is going on underneath the water. And so the Ruach of Elohim is hovering over the water because in order for now there to be life or livable life now, this periodic table of elements must take place. All these things must come into play. And so what I'm saying here now is that the Father is the master geneticist. He's the master agriculturalist. All these things will play a very important role in the creation story. And I'll leave that there for now, because we want to get to verse 2. And Elohim said, let there be light, and there was light. And we already broke down last week that this light is not the sun, the moon, and the stars. This here light now is talking about, again, this periodic table of elements. We're talking about atoms. Okay, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about electricity, and we're talking about atoms here. And verse 4, it says that Elohim saw the light that it was good, or that it was came, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were called the first day. Now, the first day. Anybody know what first day is in Hebrew? Okay, we have Yom Rishon, like I brought out last week. Yom Rishon. But what's interesting here now is we kept it Hebraic. First day is actually Akkad. When you look it up, the word is actually Yom Akkad. So when we begin to look at what's actually going on the planet Earth as the Ruach of Elohim is hovering over the waters because there's darkness, and that darkness now is representing chaos. So out of the chaos, the darkness, the Father calls light into existence. And so now once there's a balance between light and darkness, the Father on the very first day is trying to bring everything back into Akkad, which means unity. He's trying to bring everything back into peace, shalom, one accord. All of that is what he's doing just in verse 1, 2, 3, and 4. Verse 6, and Elohim said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Okay, let me just go back on first. The word first there is the Hebrew Strong's number 0259, and you have the word Akkad, or as some might say, Aked. Just to make sure that everybody is following along here. Verse 7. And Elohim made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was came, or so. And Elohim called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And Elohim, verse 9 said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. We went over that last week. Verse 10. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters called he seas. And Elohim saw. That word saw is going to be very important because it's the Hebrew word ra'ah. And again, Ra'ah, we have the Resh, the Aleph, and the Hay. And it means saw or see.
Is there a variant of Ra that means like evil?
Right, exactly. There is. Exactly. So if I'm not mistaken now, I believe what they did now is that I believe that's that Ra. That's actually evil. But this is when we get into what I'm about to say right now. In Hebrew, where we get involved with the adding and dropping of letters. If you was to put a yod in front of that, the way that it is in Genesis, when every time it says and he saw, it's actually that yod now is not that saw or see. That's correct. But whenever you see that yod there, that means he saw. So you then have to identify now who is the he when everything came into existence and he saw that it was good. This he now is a pronoun, and who's actually doing the creating now is the Mashiach under the guise and rules of Yahuwah. Right. So that yod is going to be very important, because without the yod, you don't know who's actually in charge or who's doing anything here. But that yod now, the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet and the smallest letter of the Hebrew alphabet, lets us know that this is now a he. If I was to add an aleph in front of that word, now we have I saw versus he saw. So a lot of times when you see again the aleph in front of a word, that means I. And when you see a yod, that's he. And all of this now is in the Hebrew, but it's not like that in the English. And this is the reason why a lot of times people make a lot of mistakes in reading the scriptures, because they're only looking at it from the King James perspective. And when I'm doing my research, what I like to try to do is make sure that I exhaust every means necessary to try to make sure that I get the point across so that there's no problems. And the reason why I look at the scriptures from this perspective with science and with biology and with anatomy is because this book that I stole from Aisha, all right? And she had this book years ago. The Life and Science of Biology. And there's a lot of biology and anatomy books that's out there. When I begin to look at how things came to be, and looking at how the human body functions, and see now how the human body coincides with everything that's in Shamayim, or the heavens, it's just magnificent. I can't do anything but appreciate it. And so if anybody was to ask me now, again, show me the Father, I would have to say, look at yourself. That's what I would have to do. Verse 10, and Elohim called the dry land earth, the gathering of the waters called he seas, and Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And Elohim, this Yahuwah Elohim, saw that it was good. He saw, the Yod and the Ra'ah, he saw that it was good. In the evening and the morning was the third day. And Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. So here, like I said, now we have the sun, the moon, and the stars. But when we was at verse 3, it talked about let there be light. And what I was just trying to show here now is that we begin to talk about atoms and cells and things like that. We begin to look at the periodic table of elements, which is going on in verses 3 and 4, versus what we have in verse 14, where it talks about let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth, and it was so. Here we're talking about the sun, the moon, and the stars. Verse 16, and Elohim made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also. We're not going to go into it today, but the word lesser and greater is not in, well, we do have Hakadah. The word Hakadah means great, but, okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later, okay, but that's going to take us off into something else. But verse 17, and Elohim set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw, he saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day, and Elohim said, let the waters move abundantly, the moving creature that have life, and fowls that may fly above the earth, and the open firmament of Shamayim, or heaven. And Elohim created great whales. We went over this last week about whales and dolphins and mammals, and we went through all of that, and every living creature. We went over the whole thing about creatures and what this particular creature is in verse 21 versus the one in verse 20, and we began to talk about mankind, okay, because there was a man that existed before who we now know as Adam. So this creature now moveth that which the waters brought forth abundantly, and we are all water creatures. All of us are water creatures, all right? And all of us started from atoms to cells to organisms to bodies. All of us started out that way. Now, every winged fowl after his kind, and Elohim saw. Again, he saw that it was good. So it was actually in existence for him to actually say that it was good. Verse 22, and Elohim blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And then evening and the morning were the fifth day. And Elohim said, okay, this is where it gets very, very interesting here. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle, okay, and creeping thing, and beasts of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And Elohim made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after its kind. Everything is supposed to procreate after its own kind. We talked about last week, and I'm just going to do a quick show of this one more time. We all say that, you know what, we're all of one blood. I can be with whoever it is that I want to be with and everything like that. I say that in the beginning there was an original, all right? And there was a song out with this reggae artist where he said that we're all one blood, you know, the whole thing there, all right? But that can't be true. Now, my argument is this. There's an A blood type, there's a B blood type, there's an AB blood type, there's an O blood type, and there's an ABO blood type. And they're saying, a lot of scientists, archaeologists, they believe that this ABO blood type is possibly the original blood type. Now, if there are so many different blood types out there, and if there was an original blood type, is it possible now that the reason why we have so many different blood types is because there was some type of mutation? Something happened. Now, we know that there's an XY chromosome and then there's an XX chromosome. And we know that in order for you to get a male, all right, we know through the whole fertilization process and everything like that, or the germination process that happens between a man and a woman, when they come together, these two come together, what's going to happen now is that they're exchanging genetic material. 23 chromosomes for the woman, 23 chromosomes for the male is what they're producing. Now, they're both now 46 chromosomes. Let's put that there. They're both 46 chromosomes, but they're sharing an equal amount of chromosomes in order to produce a baby. So, inside of the mother's womb, being that she's XX, all right, so when if there's an X comes in contact with the sperm cells and it starts to go through its phases now, if it's an XY, it's going to be a boy. If it's a XX, it's going to be a girl. All right. Looking at the different blood types, what they had also showed too now is that if, maybe Akoti, she can help me out with this here. If there's, if I was an A blood type and let's say Yashra'al was an AB blood type. The baby now, because this is the thing, when a woman is pregnant, the blood of the baby never mixes with the mother. Okay, it's always the blood of the father. If the blood mixes with, if the mother's blood mixes with the baby's blood, I mean, the baby can die. Okay, I think the disorder might be called, is it jaundice? Jaundice or something? Is that the disorder? Is not? Okay, we'll get back to it, but we do know, what is it?
Bad blood.
Oh, bad blood? Okay, we call it, he said bad blood. But we do know that the mother's blood cannot come in contact with the baby. That would actually kill the baby. So again, blood types are very important. So again, if we have so many different blood types, the A, the B, the AB, and the O, and if there was an original blood type, and if the Father created man in his own image and everything like that, and he said that it was good, what happened where we now have this mutation of the different bloods? Because if I needed a kidney, if I needed a heart or whatever like that, they would have to check our bloods to make sure that we're compatible. Because if I was to take your organ, if you was to take my organ, if the blood types don't match, my organ can actually now, your body would begin to fight against my organ, because it would look at it as a foreign object, and you would have to actually now be on antibiotics for the rest of your life, because they're going to now try to lower your immune system to have your body to stop fighting the kidney that I just gave you. All right, so again, the reason why I'm bringing all of this out this way is because it makes me appreciate the Father that much, where the Father is telling us that everything is supposed to produce after its own kind. But what the enemy has done now is that, and one day I'll be Asa here, is that doing things after its own kind is so important, because what's happening now in agriculture, this is the main thing that's going on right now, is GMO. Everything is a mixture. And so the Father doesn't deal with mixtures. If there's going to be a mixture now, we're going to have a problem. All right, so we'll talk about the tree of good and evil a little bit later. But again, all of this now is genetics. This is the periodic table of elements. All these things are very, very important. The soil is important. Chlorophyll is important, because all these things now produce life. And one of the main colors in creation is green and blue. And we begin to talk about the prisms of life, what we have with the rainbow, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, so let me just speed it up. It's just that science is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Verse 25, and Elohim made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind. Again, that word kind is very important. And everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, and after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish, of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over all creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. We went over that already. Verse 27, so Elohim created man in his own image. In the image of Elohim created he him, male and female created he them. I heard a lot of breakdowns with this. I do not believe that the first Adam was a hermaphrodite. Don't believe that. All right? And some people teach that. They teach that at this point, Adam was asexual and he was able to reproduce on his own. That sounds crazy to me. So, because I do know with hermaphrodites, when you study it, both sexual organs don't work. Either one is going to work and the other is not. Both of them don't work. All right, so you can't impregnate your own self. That's not going to happen. All right, so and Elohim, and again, when we begin to look at chromosomes, and we have to be careful with things that we do, because when we look into hermaphrodites, there was even a chromosome that I found where this is normal X, Y for both male and female, there's situations where there's X, X, Y chromosomes and X, Y, Y chromosomes. All right, so the reason why it's telling us after his own kind, because when we look at the human genome, which is one thing, and they try to talk about this evolution thing, which I don't buy, because the scripture says everything produces after its own kind. They look at, take for example, the chimpanzee. They say that there's only a 3%, I think it says like 3% difference between the human genome and with the chimpanzee. But this 3% difference now, when we begin to look at cells and atoms and everything else that consists, the difference between the two now is still is still a big difference. The number looks small, but there's still a major difference. Okay, Mr. Carr, I think we pretty much got the gist of what's going on here. So let's get to now the meat of it. And we're just going to run through this, and we'll probably just finish it up on Tuesday.
So we'll be into this for another couple of weeks.
No, just one more week. Just one more week, because I really want to get back to this calendar and get up this Jubilee date here. Just 400 years, and then we have to look at also the Jubilee year. Verse 21, it says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished," all right? "And all the host of them." That's not how it is in Hebrew, all right? But let me just try to speed it up here a little bit. "And on the seventh day, Elohim ended his work." Again, he ended his work on the seventh day, or the beginning. We'll talk about this. Let me just read it. So he ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which Elohim, or Yahuwah Elohim, had made. Now these are the generations, or the Toledot, of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, in the day that Yahuwah Elohim made the earth and the heavens, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, every herb and field before it grew, for Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. Part of verse 2 and 5, where it says that the Father knew what the seed would produce before it was put into the ground. It just lets us know that the Father, these things was created in the Father's likeness, in his image from the very beginning. So he knew what would be the outcome of what he planted before he planted it, just like we had talked about with the cookies, the image and the likeness. You already know, you're having an idea of what it's going to look like before you actually begin to cook it. What we find interesting here now is that we saw in Genesis chapter 1, it said that the earth began to produce vegetation, that the Father saw it and it was good. We have here in verse 2 and 5, all right, that in every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for Yahuwah Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. Verse 6, but there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Verse 7 now talks about Yahuwah Elohim formed the man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. We don't have this explanation in verse 1. But what people are saying now is that verse 2 is actually a continuance of verse 1. Let's see if that's so. Now, where we're at here, it says Yahuwah Elohim planted a garden eastward in the Eden. There's no mention of an Eden in in chapter 1. No mention of an Eden, no mention of a garden. That Adam was told to be fruitful and to multiply the whole earth. That's what it said, to multiply and fulfill the whole earth there. So it's not talking about a central location. Here, we're talking about a central location. And we're going to talk about where this man actually came from. because this is not, when we're reading this story here now, we can't take everything literal where it says that he created man from the dust of the ground, and we'll go over it a little bit more Tuesday. My argument is that he took a man that was not in the garden, took this man and elevated this man into a function now where he's going to now be a horticulturist or agriculturist in this part of the land versus the commission that was given to everybody else. So, Elohim planted a garden eastward in the Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So, where did this man come from that the Father breathed into him the life, and he became a living soul? The Father planted a garden in the place called Eden, and he put the man in Eden. This man did not have the same commission and responsibilities as the man in Genesis, in the book of Genesis, verse 1. And out of the garden made Yahuwah Elohim to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden. There's no mention of a tree of good and evil in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's not mentioned at all in Genesis 1. And the river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads. And the name of the first was called Pishon, and that compasseth the whole land of Keulah, and there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone, and the name of the second river is pronounce this in Hebrew, Gikon, and that's the Gimel, the Yod, the Ket, the U, and the Nun. The same is it that compasses the whole land of Cush, and the name of the third river was Chadikel, and this was pointed toward the east of Ashur, and the fourth river was Parat. And Yahuwah Elohim took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress the garden and to keep it. And Yahuwah Elohim commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden. Okay, he was not in the Eden, he was in the garden. Who was in the Eden? Elohim they lived in the Eden, but the man lived in the garden. Thou mayest freely eat of it, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, and the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. And Yahuwah Elohim said, it is not good that man should be alone, and I will make him an helpmeet for him. I'm going to stop right there, and we'll finish that up next week. So what I'm doing so far is that with the first creation, the Father commissioned that group of Adamites to actually now roam the land, to be fruitful and to multiply there. What we now need now is a man to tend a certain parcel of land. That particular parcel of land is actually called the Garden of Eden, and that particular man was actually placed, and he was told to guard and keep that parcel of land. And we're going to stop here, like I said, where now this man didn't have a mate, and we begin to see now a process where the Father is going to now take something from out of this man, this particular type of genetic material from out of this man, and actually upgrade a woman that was actually part of the first Adamites. And I'm going to share that next week. So that's pretty much a rough breakdown of what's going on between chapters 1 and 2 that we have so far. So I want some questions. I need some questions just to make sure that
I want to look at 4.
2 and 4.
2:4 says, these are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created.
Mm-hmm.
And the day that it was Elohim made the earth in the heavens.
Right.
And so then it goes into the whole creation story again.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I don't see, and I'm asking you to help me see it, is that where it's actually that he created it twice, it seems like he's just going over what he had already done in more detail, is what I see from this.
As far as location is concerned, do you see the differences between Genesis 1 and 2?
Well, we know that he's taken them and put them in the midst of the garden, but and we know that they were outside the garden, and he put it in the garden. So yeah, I can't see the difference in location.
So this creation process didn't take place in the garden. There's no such word letter as the word A in Hebrew. And we went over last week when we went over the word creature, and it talked about a creature actually as being a man, a living soul, a spirit. And we have a situation where the Father takes a man and he does something to this man where he breathes into this man. He gives this man his spirit, and he gives him what they call a nefesh. If he's giving this man these attributes, these qualities, is it safe to say, if we're looking at that word creature, in its definition, according to the Strong's numbers that we used last week, if the Father is now giving this man these qualities, do you believe that he had those qualities prior?
I don't get. Can you say that again?
Okay, in Genesis chapter, let's go 1. It says, go to verse. And Elohim said, verse 26, and Elohim said, let us make man. The language is going to be very important. The scripture didn't say, let us make a man, because the argument now last week was that when we see the word creature in verse, where we at here? In verse 20, in verse 24, it gave us the definition of a living person, of a being. And then in verse 27, my argument now is that he took that man, okay, and created him in his own image, and in the image of Elohim created he male and female created he them. There was a function and a responsibility that this man was supposed to do outside of the garden. Because we have to ask ourselves now, if the Father created this man, what was he creating this man for? Because there was a point now where there was complete void and darkness upon the face of the earth. The Father did all of his creation. There's vegetation and everything growing now in Genesis, on the 4th day. All this stuff is growing. We need mankind to actually now cultivate the land and to replenish the earth and bring it back up now to into living conditions. It said now in verse 28, Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said, said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish. So the fish is already there. They had to have dominion over the fish, because the fish are there. That's the reason why I kept bringing it up. And he saw these things, and the Father saw that it was good. He was at dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowls over the air, and over everything that moved upon the earth. Over everything that moved upon the earth. And Elohim said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. These instructions, the Father created a man. He's telling him now is that you're now supposed to have dominion over all these things. Vegetation is here. He even tells man how to eat, what foods. The animals now are not supposed to eat other animals. Everything here is vegetation. These are the instructions that he's giving this man to do, how to operate and how to function. You go to Genesis 2 now, it talks about now the father now is going to plant a garden. He's going to plant a garden now. This particular man, he's going to take from amongst one of these people here now, upgrade that particular man who's going to be far more superior to the other men, put this man in a garden, and that man is going to guard now a specific location called the garden. This is what he's doing. Versus now what's going on outside of the garden. He took this man from out somewhere, and in the book of Jubilees, let me just read this. I'll just share with you right here. In the book of Jubilees, the 3rd chapter, verse 31-32. Watch how this goes. It says, "And to Adam alone did he give the wherewith to covet his shame," because we knew the sin that happened in the garden, "of all the beasts and cattle, and on this account it is prescribed on the heavenly tablets as touching all those things who know the judgment of the Torah, that they should cover their shame and should not uncover themselves as the other people uncover themselves." So we have Adam here is being told that you must cover yourselves and not to uncover yourselves and to like the others do. My argument now is that this man, Adam, is a civilized man, and he's not behaving now. He should not behave the way that the others are. And then it says, "And on the new moon, on the 4th month, Adam and his woman went forth from the Garden of Eden, and they dwelt in the land of Elda, E-L-D-A, in the land of their creation." I'm like, that's interesting. Adam was not created in the garden. He was taken from a place called Elden and then placed in the garden. But prior to him now being expelled from the garden, he was given instructions now on how to wear clothing and not to be like the other people that are around him. What do we do with that?
Well, I think, I'm looking at that. It was saying that when Adam was in the garden, that he didn't know that they were naked.
Right, and we have to kind of like take that, like the Hebrew word arom means naked.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's what the Hebrew word arom, naked means. Now, there's another way of looking at that, is that they actually had on clothes. But what happened now is that, like for example, your child he can have on clothing, but he's naked before you, meaning now is that he's blameless, there's no guilt, he has nothing to hide. So he's naked. You can see him for what he or she really is. But once they commit a sin, what they're going to try to do now is cover their nakedness because they know that they've done something wrong. So the covering now is just the fact now is that they're now ashamed of what they're doing, and you can no longer see the person for who they are because now they're living a life, or you can see the sin in them. And so the father is saying, you know what, Adam, where are you? And he said that I am naked. Who had told you that I'm naked? It's not that the father he couldn't see him. He didn't know what he had did or anything like that. It's just that now Adam has a virus, just like a computer now. He has a virus because he's beginning to say things, and the father knows that he's naked, and he's trying to cover the lie or the mistake that he did. And he said, well, who told you that you were naked? Just by the conversation alone, you know what? There's a virus. And then he begins to talk about now the tree of good and evil, this GMO. have you eaten, because Adam didn't say anything yet, have you eaten of the tree of good and evil? Because that's the only way now that you can ever say that you're naked. Even though I have on clothes, I can steal from you, all right? And I'm fully clothed. But you can understand by my character, by my demeanor. When you see me, you be like, you know what? Kasadahba is not the same anymore. I was able to see him. But now when I look at him, in his eyes, you know what? He's covering up some. Now he's lying about something. And this was happening in this situation here. Now, was Adam and his Yashra'al literally naked when they didn't have any clothes on? That's debatable. All right? And you know, if a person said that he didn't have any clothes on at all, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to make a statement with that. But the point that I was trying to make here now was that there was a status that Adam had in the garden. Adam came from a place, and he was placed in a particular location. That location was the Garden of Eden. There were other people before Adam and his Yashra'al. There were other people there. Okay, there's plenty of scriptures to share that there was other people. All right, because even Cain made mention of other people. He talked about killing. He talked about a place of safety. That place of safety was called the land of Nod. And the land of Nod now was east of Eden. It was a place of wanderers. A place of wanderers. I found that interesting. So again, the only thing that I'm trying to share here now is that when Adam and his Yashra'al were expelled, they were now kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and they returned to the place where they came from. Kasadahba, you know what? You can stay in my house as long as you follow the rules and regulations. All right? I'm in your house and following all the rules and regulations. I'll start to steal your money, steal your TV, all this stuff like that. You know what? Kasadahba, you go back to the place where I picked you up from, which was the streets. That's where I found you at. And then when you go to the book of Ezekiel now, the 16th chapter, where did the Father find the nation of Israel? In the streets. She was bloody, okay? Her mother was a Hittite. Your father is an Amorite. You was filthy when I met you. I brought you into my house. Right now, looking at literal terms, this would be a garden. Versus now, how I was living out there in the streets. I have a nice big house. There's air conditioning. There's a bathtub. I can take a bath. There's food for me to eat. The whole 9 yards. But as soon as you come home from work, you notice something different. You begin to question me. All right? You no longer see again the purity inside of me. And you begin to question me. My voice is not the same. Okay? My mannerism is different. You go tell Zabud, you know, listen, you know what? Something's not right with Kasadahba. You know what? What I think you should do is have a little talk with him, put him up in the car, and drop him off where you found him. He's no longer allowed back in the house of Eden anymore.
I agree. I mean, not I agree or disagree. I'm just saying I do see where he's created him outside of the garden, which is something that I never, ever, ever saw. I always thought he was created in the garden, he and Eve. I think what I'm having a hard time seeing is where he was created. And for some reason, as I'm reading, I do believe that there was other men on the earth, which is something that I hadn't believed before. So I think I just need to read a little bit more so I can see where I'm at. So I'm coming along, but slowly.
Yes. Okay. And you know what? And you know, again, the reason why I'm doing this is because I like the creation story. And again, when you look at this periodic table of elements and see how things came into existence. But I guarantee you this, is that on the day of judgment, the Father's not going to ask you for a breakdown of Genesis 1 and 2.
Not at all.
He's not going to do that. And so again, but just understanding the Father's magnificent works and everything like that, and again, there is a difference, and we can again, at any time talk about it again. But
I think this is awesome.
Yeah, when we talk about this particular place that the Father is actually designating, this place here is not the same as the rest of the earth. And let me just do this in ending. When I talked about, look at it this is today, all right? I'm going to draw this right quick. This right here is the temple. Everything outside of here, okay, people are there. Okay, we have north, let's say south, east, west. Again, there's people here, and what the Father wants us to do now, because this is the tabernacle. The Father wants us here. But right now, we're here. We're outside. When the temple is set up, we have the court of the Gentiles. We have the court of the women. Okay?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because, which is interesting, okay? Not to take anything away from anybody, all right?
They said they need to be outside. Go ahead.
No, not the women, no. No, this is the temple. This is inside. Yeah, right, exactly. What I'm just sharing here now with this is that we didn't freely do what we wanted to do. There was positions and sitting arrangements and things of that sort for women and men and Gentiles. You wasn't free just to walk around and just do what it is that you wanted to do. There was order with everything. That's all that I'm saying. That's another lesson. But this is the court of the Gentiles, This is the court of the women. And then this was pretty much where everybody else dwelt at. All right? And the goal now was to watch the Levitical priesthood with the brazen altar, which is one of the elements here now on the periodic table of elements, and that's another thing. But the structure of this brazen altar is where the priest now would do the sacrifices. Okay? Now, after that, now we will have the first curtain. When we go through the first curtain now, what was interesting now is that you have the menorah, you have the showbread, and then you have, before you get to the next curtain now, you have the altar of incense. And then inside of the Holy of Holies now, you had the Ark of the Covenant. So Kasadahba, what does this have to do with anything? This has to do now is that when we look at the Garden of Eden was set up this way. There were people there. But the people here were different from the people out here. The people that's in here are now set apart people. But before they were here, they were primitive. Like now, not primitive in the sense that, like we're dragging our knuckles on the ground. Meaning, as far as intellect is concerned, we're looked at now as regressing and not progressing.
Right.
And so what's happening now is that when we see now in Genesis, the 2nd chapter, when the Father now is giving this man his ruach, his set-apart spirit now, he's now allowed to be here, no longer on the outside. And this is where Adam and his Isha were at. And when they broke the law, statutes, and commandments, they were kicked out of here, and they were now back here in the world. Right now, what's happening now is that, just like I brought out last week, the Father now in the book of Ezekiel, remember it talked about the 2 sticks? And it talked about Ezekiel, can these dry bones live? Right now, we're considered dry bones.
Right.
All right? When the Father took this Adam, educated this Adam, and gave Adam instructions on how to keep a shamar, which means to guard and to protect the garden. This is this right here, what he's talking about. But he now has a set-apart spirit on him. In Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, it says, Ezekiel is told, can these dry bones live? But remember now, in order for these dry bones to live, it talked about the Father had to put sinew on the bones. And the sinew represents they have to come together. That's what sinew does. It puts things together. It talked about breathing upon them. And after the whole, because it talked about different processes that happened with the man. And then it said that the bones began to shake. They began to come together. And when they came together now, they began to stand on their feet. Okay? And once they stood on their feet now, they left the stage. Now, look at the metaphors behind it. Anything that is not standing on its feet now represents now that this particular thing now is in a low state. When it stands up on its feet, erect, okay, this lets us know that he is now alive. Anything that is laying flat is considered dead. You're on your knees, you're about dead, okay then, but the set apart spirit now puts you here. When Adam and Yashra'al left the Garden of Eden, they were no longer in a set apart state of mind anymore. They now began to digress. They weren't progressing anymore. Because the punishment was now is that in the day that you eat of it now, you shall die. Whenever you're dying now, you're now regressing to death. Man's position now was to live forever.
Right.
But if you sin, you're going to regress. Right now, we are regressing. Just like everybody else that's out here. You know, you're regressing. The Father's going to take you, Zabu. He's going to bring his set-apart spirit upon you because you come from the world. Remember the scriptures talk about, it talks about the world in the book of John all the time. It's about the world, but be not of the world, come out of the world. All of that stuff there. So, again, just trying to bring you back here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I get it.
That's what it is. And again, so that's about it. I mean, just talk to me. And again, if I needed to break it down, it's just that a lot of times it might be a lot easier for me to see, and I don't have any problems like using like other analogies and things like that to help the next person see. It's the beauty of it. It's just that I just wanted to share with everybody that there was people that lived before Adam and Eve. The Father took that man, cultivated that man, spoke with that man, told that man to protect the garden and everything like that. There was nothing mentioned in Genesis, the first chapter, about the Father taking a man, putting him in the garden, and telling that man to protect the garden. And he was protecting the garden. Because you would have to ask yourself, what is he protecting the garden from? Exactly. When you have children, Solomon and James, your job, with your understanding of Torah, is to protect them from those on the outside. Father, I pray that you take them not out of the world, but they need to be in the world because we still need to interact. But while you're interacting in the world, okay, don't be of the world. And there's something very important, too, that the Father explained to Adam and his Isha before they were kicked out of the garden. It made mention that they was kicked out of the garden on the fourth day. On the fourth month. Now, looking at the Hebrew calendar, the way that it's situated, that fourth month now would have been the month of, anybody know? Huh? No, the fourth month, because we had the first month, so we're talking about basically like Savan, Ayar, run the late parts of that, the fourth month. So that would actually now be like June.
Yeah.
Now, the people that's living outside of the world, they're doing a whole lot of crazy stuff. All right? So what I just found important or interesting now is that clothing is very important because, and I believe, just me personally, I believe that America is the daughter of Babylon. I just believe that. Now, and the reason why I say that is because lewdness and nudity is something really heavy here.
Yeah.
And so we also have now on June the 26th, okay, is Rainbow Day, okay, or you go girl, that faggot, if I can say that, homosexual, whatever, you know.
I think
that whole thing.
The word is queer.
Oh, queer, okay, queer. Now, so that's Queer Day. And so Adam and his Isha were kicked out of the garden, okay, during the fourth month on Queer Day, and again, this is just like it's like personal joke. And the father said, "Listen, you know what? When you leave here, make sure that you have some clothes on." All right. That just was a side of it. Yeah. Because again, you see something happen even in today's time where they made June the 26th. All right. Queer Day. Listen, get up out of here. But I'm telling you, you know what? Yeah, just make sure that you keep some clothes on. All right. Don't get involved in Mardi Gras and all this other stuff and all of that crap.
I had another question. I can't remember what it was, so, and I don't want to be another 30 minutes. I'll be asking these questions, oh no, I was thinking about creating man, putting man into the garden. So him forming. So you're saying you don't believe that he was formed from the dust of the ground, like the actual dust?
Again, wordplay. Yeah. He created him, formed him, took him. He created him from the dust of the ground. If I was to take a man from the dust of the ground and then form him or upgrade him to where I need him to be, I mean, yeah, I can see that, but not literally taking some. I do believe that happened at some point. I do believe that now. It's just that lingo, analogies are very important. Like for example, let's say 1,000 years from now, somebody read one of my memoirs, and it said, and it was reading, you know what, Kasadahba, you know what, he writing in his letter that he went and played basketball with his dogs. And then after he went and played basketball with his dogs, he then went to the movies with his dogs, and him and his dogs, they had dinner. Mm-hmm. And then after that, him and his dog went to bed. So a person would say, listen, you know what? Kasadahba was into animal craziness. He's taking dogs to the movies. He's laying in the bed with dogs, all this stuff like that. But understanding culture and language, we know that the dog was actually my homeboys. We went to play basketball because the dog can't play basketball.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to take a literal dog to the movie, but you know, there are some people that do crazy stuff like that. But only thing I'm just trying to share here now is that let's look behind the literal writing sometimes, because there is a Peshat level, and we can read it, that the Father created man from the dust of the ground. I do believe that, because we are of the ground. We are.
Right, I was going to say that we all came out of the water.
Right, exactly.
The ground came out of the water. We know. We had all the elements in the dust is in here.
Right.
The elements of man is in here.
Absolutely.
I don't find it far fetched, but then I also have to look at him being the creator. He could do anything he wanted to do.
Exactly.
And I think it's always been used in the Christian church to show that we're nothing. Mm-hmm. We're nothing. And he took us and created something out of that nothing. I think that's how it's always been used in the Christian church.
And that's correct. That's the reason why we went to Colossians and we went to those scriptures there where the things that we see, mm-hmm. okay, versus, things unseen. Because before the death and resurrection of the Mashiach, we were in a particular stage of understanding. Mm-hmm. Because Daniel the 12th chapter talked about, listen, you know what? Shut up the book until the time of the end. But there's going to come a point where knowledge is going to be increased. So the way that we're able to look at things today, we were not able to see those things, let's say 10, 15, 20, even 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. Because of advanced technology, we can see an atom. We know that there are things that are smaller than an atom. We'll begin to look at quarks and biaps and things of that sort. These things are smaller than an atom because it wasn't so many years ago Well, they said that there's nothing smaller than an atom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so we begin to look at hydrogen and calcium and phosphorus. All these things here now is that we can't, because as you already know, right now, there's so much bacteria and germs and things like that that's floating around, but we can't see it with the naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
And even with inside of your body now, as you know, there's good bacteria and there's bad bacteria. So, I mean, everything must work with inside of its balance and everything like that. We begin to look at the gastric juices and things like that that's inside of your stomach and everything. We know that now those things are very important because as you're eating food and things like that, there's a lot of bacteria and germs in that. But all the stuff that's going on inside of your stomach, it helps kill a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that the acid that's in your stomach, if you even put your finger in there, it'll burn your finger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is just, but it's also chemically balanced and so properly aligned with everybody, with each and everyone's individual body. It can't be a mistake. I mean, it would have to be all the Father.
Oh, yeah.
And so again, when I read books like this, I'm like, wow, you know what? How can I not give esteem to the Father? I mean, I don't see how not. I mean, birds have a different genetic makeup. I mean, there are things that even look alike. Cheetahs and what is that? Jaguars. They look pretty much alike, but you know what? They're different. There's a difference between a horse and a zebra. I mean, it's just, and everything made it after its own kind. The magnificence of the human body, you know, it's
We
magnificent.
shouldn't be marrying dogs and gorillas and stuff like that. You know, you start to hear that people are trying to marry their animals. And somebody did marry their dog or something like that. I don't think we're supposed to be mixing or doing this stuff that they're doing in genetics where they're missing the different chromosomes. But you know, we can talk about that later. Solomon, are you awake?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah,
there
we
a
can
question?
close the shop. Yeah, we can talk. Yeah, we can finish this.
What?
Is there anybody saying anything on it?
No.
Oh, okay.
All right,
Well,
look.
I left it over. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but we can go ahead and end services for today, and pretty much actually that's about it. There's nothing really to go over on Tuesday. We can just move on. I mean, again, anything else out there on YouTube, Facebook? I mean, just hit me up, newstudynewaage@aol.com, and I'll try to answer the question to the best of my ability. But from here forward, man, we're gonna move on into the next lesson. I think I pretty much exhausted this year. Okay, so we're gonna stand up. We're gonna face the east. I'm gonna blow the shofar 7 times, and we have our good brother Yonatan to end us with prayer.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Heavenly Father, Yah.
Okay, we just gonna blow the
Yeah, blow
shofar
shofar
right quick.
first.
Yes, no problem.
One more.
One more. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Heavenly Father, Yah, we thank you, Yah, for your goodness and your mercy toward us, oh Father. Thank you, Yah, for pitying us in the times where we make the Kodesh unclean and defile the righteous things that you give us, oh Father. Thank you for being merciful and pitying us like how a father pities his youngest child, Father.
Wow.
Thank you for dealing with us in such immense kindness. You who know all perfection in us that our light is still darkness, Yah. You still bother, you still dwell, you still patiently abide with us, and we just owe our hearts unto you, and we do our best to obey the things your son told us, immersions and love for our neighbor, forgiving
70 times 7 in a day, Father. I pray you continue to mend and heal and show us what love is, because the hardness of our hearts causes so much destruction unnecessarily all the time. And we're so ignorant of how forgiveness could have stopped so much of the destruction we manifest in our own lives. So yeah, I pray that you look upon congregation Yashra'al as your servants,
Yes.
whether it be many or whether it be few, that you put a heart of zeal for your word within the men and women, the young and the old among us, because it's all needed for this body to properly perform. And I even thank you for putting these words on my heart to manifest them during this time, so that we can righteously and intentionally know that we serve you, and it's not by accident, and it's not just a guessing game, it's faith. Thank you, we bless you in the name of Yashra'al, Mashiach.